The morning hum of Redwood Regional Airport's Terminal B buzzed with routine energy. Footsteps, rolling luggage, scattered announcements. Officer Daniel Hawthorne stood quietly behind the security checkpoint, his tired eyes watching the crowd. At his side, Arco sat alert. The German Shepherd was no stranger to airports, trained to sniff out threats, to read the unspoken. But this morning, something was off. Arco fidgeted, ears twitching at every movement. Daniel, wincing from a familiar ache in his shoulder, gave the dog an idle pat. That's when Arco stiffened, his gaze fixed on a lone woman descending the escalator. She stood out. Draped in an oversized sweater, she carried a stack of documents close to her chest. Her skin was pale, drawn. Her posture sagged, like she was carrying far more than just her pregnancy. Then it came. A bark, loud, piercing. Heads turned. Arco's stance sharpened. Another bark followed, more frantic, filled with urgency. Daniel blinked in surprise. This wasn't protocol alert behavior. It was different, desperate. "Easy, boy," he whispered, gripping Arco's collar. The woman froze near a row of seats. A glance at her ID confirmed her name, Julia Rivers. Her eyes locked with Arco's. There was something in that stare. Recognition? Fear? Daniel raised his hand toward her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She didn't answer. Her eyes scanned the terminal like she was calculating an escape. But exhaustion slowed her. She stepped forward cautiously, hand resting over her swollen stomach. Then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, her knees gave way. The files in her arms scattered like leaves across the gleaming floor. The files tumbled from her hands, like leaves in a storm. Photos, sealed envelopes, stamped documents fanning across the airport floor. Julia Rivers crumpled with them, collapsing onto her side with a strangled cry. A gasp surged from the nearby crowd. Officer Daniel was already sprinting forward. "Medical!" he shouted, weaving through startled travelers. Arco stayed close, barking, then diving nose first into the scattered papers. The German Shepherd let out a high-pitched whine as he pawed at one particular envelope. Daniel knelt beside the woman, heart pounding. Her pulse was faint, her eyes rolled halfway back, lips barely parted. Then, glancing down, he noticed something alarming. One of the documents bore a bold red stamp. Classified, do not duplicate. Just as he reached for it, a trembling hand gripped his wrist. "Help me," Julia whispered. Paramedics burst onto the scene seconds later. Daniel backed away to give them room, but Arco wasn't done. The dog nudged another envelope toward Daniel's feet. This one looked less official. No seal, no government markings, just 2 handwritten words. "I'm sorry." The weight of that message hit Daniel in the chest. Something deeper than a simple collapse was at play here. Julia's condition, Arco's abnormal behavior, and these cryptic papers. It all pointed to something darker, beneath the surface. Hours passed. The noise of the terminal faded behind clinic walls. Daniel leaned outside the small medical unit, rubbing his shoulder, an old injury from his detective days. He'd left the bureau for peace, but that peace had clearly just ended. Inside, Julia lay pale and silent, connected to IV fluids. When she briefly regained consciousness, she only managed to confirm her name and due date, just a few weeks away. Then she drifted off again, lost in the haze of fatigue and fear. Daniel stood still, watching her through the window. His dog had never misread danger. And if Arco was this distressed, it meant they were only seeing the beginning of a much larger threat. Nurses murmured theories: anemia, dehydration, stress. But Daniel suspected more. On a nearby table, the pile of papers Julia had dropped remained untouched. now neatly stacked by protocol. One page, half tucked in the center, had a bold title, Project Redwood. Next to it was a sheet filled with cryptic codes. Daniel felt a cold thread tighten around his chest. Arco sat beside him, ears twitching at every sound, gaze fixed on the clinic's door. The shepherd wasn't resting. He was watching. Daniel's mind drifted back to a different life, his old detective days. Once, he'd dealt with top-secret documents, chasing a group of rogue contractors smuggling classified intelligence. That case had cost him a partner, and maybe a part of himself. Now here it was again, secrets, warnings, and the same gnawing dread. "You feel it too, don't you?" he whispered to Arco. The dog gave a low whimper and scraped the floor with one paw. Affirmation. The clinic door creaked open. Dr. Irene Caldwell stepped into the hallway, wiping her hands. She looked familiar. Volunteer work at police clinics, maybe. She nodded at Daniel. She's stable but emotionally overloaded. Her vitals are chaotic, likely from massive psychological stress. Is she involved in something criminal? "I'm not sure," Daniel admitted. But the dog reacted, and the documents, they're not ordinary. Dr. Caldwell nodded thoughtfully. "She should be alert within an hour. You can talk to her then." Daniel left her with a heavy heart and found himself alone in a quiet hallway. He flipped through the documents again. One page described a high-security facility, coded operations, and a phrase he didn't like. Subject, Julia R. Status, critical, must be returned to Redwood at all costs. His stomach dropped. Was Redwood the airport? Or something far worse? He tucked the papers back into their folder, just as he noticed someone nearby. An older man standing by a vending machine. No drink in hand, just watching. Daniel's detective instincts screamed. He straightened. The man turned sharply and walked away. Something wasn't right, and Daniel knew, without question, the quiet was over. Daniel watched the man disappear down the corridor. No drink, no snack, just eyes that didn't belong to a traveler. Arco's ears stayed locked on the spot, body tense. The dog had felt it too. Old instincts flared. Memories he'd buried under layers of routine began to resurface. His partner Keith's death, the case that fell apart, the conspiracy they couldn't crack, ghosts he had promised never to ignore again. He clenched his jaw. Something was in motion, and Julia Rivers was at the center of it. Hours later, inside the quiet clinic, Julia stirred in her hospital bed. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she blinked awake, her hand drifting to the swell of her stomach. Daniel stepped in silently, Arco padding behind him. The dog moved with careful intention, never once taking his eyes off her. Julia's reaction was instant. Her eyes widened. Was it fear? Recognition? "Why?" she rasped. "Why did your dog bark at me?" Daniel knelt beside the bed, letting Arco gently sniff her hand. "He's trained to detect threats," he explained softly. But this time, it wasn't just detection. It felt like he was trying to warn us. Or maybe warn you. Her lower lip trembled. She looked far too young to be this tired, this hunted. Barely 30, if that. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm just trying to get away from something." The room fell into silence, the kind that makes everything feel heavier. Daniel didn't press further. She needed to speak on her own terms. But in his gut, he already knew. Whatever she was running from, it wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Daniel's voice was gentler now. "You're not under arrest, Julia, but those files, they're serious. Where did you get them?" She clutched the edge of the blanket tighter, her gaze falling away. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "They belonged to my father," she said quietly. He worked for a private security firm, the kind that handles off-the-books government projects. Daniel nodded slowly, gears already turning. Julia's next words hit like a blow. When he died, I thought it was over. But I found out they blamed him for something terrible, used him as a scapegoat. I needed to clear his name. For my baby. Her hand dropped instinctively to her belly. Daniel's mind flashed with memories, confidential briefings, classified firms, and a case that never quite resolved. "What firm?" he asked carefully. She hesitated, then whispered, "Delta Redwood." Before he could respond, Arco let out a sudden piercing bark. Both of them flinched. The dog was alert again, reacting sharply to the name. Daniel stood abruptly. He'd seen that name in the documents, but he'd also heard it before, years ago, tied to whispers of Black Ops arms deals and military secrets buried overseas. Project Redwood. Was that what this all pointed to? Daniel's expression darkened. "This is bigger than just clearing your father's name." Julia met his eyes, nodding with trembling resolve. "I got a message," she said. "Someone who knew my father said they'd be passing through this airport. They promised to help me hand over the documents, take the risk off me." "But you never found them?" Daniel asked. "No," she murmured. "I started feeling dizzy, and then your dog was barking." The puzzle was growing darker and more dangerous. Daniel wasn't sure if they were already too late, or if this was just the beginning. "They said they'd help me," Julia whispered. "I just had to meet them here and hand over the files. Then I wouldn't be the one they hunted." Daniel's jaw tightened. But the meeting never happened, and that meant one thing. She still had the evidence, which also meant she was still the target. Julia lowered her eyes. "I felt dizzy. Then everything went blurry. Then your dog barked." Daniel glanced at her wrists, subtle bruises barely hidden beneath her hospital gown. Signs of being restrained. This wasn't just fear. She had been through something violent. His phone buzzed. A message from airport security. "Suspicious individual spotted. West exit. Possibly armed." He cursed under his breath. Something was escalating. Turning to Julia, he knelt beside the bed. "Stay with Dr. Caldwell. Don't leave this room. It's not safe." She nodded, eyes wide with fear. Daniel gave Arco a quick command and left. As he stepped into the corridor, a chill settled on him. He didn't need more proof. Delta Redwood knew exactly where Julia was, and they weren't done. By evening, the airport had quieted. Most flights had ended. Lights dimmed automatically across the terminal, casting long shadows through the halls. Janitors moved silently like wraiths. Julia had been moved to a private room under surveillance. Daniel hovered nearby, unable to rest. His instincts were roaring again, like they had all those years ago. The sense that something unseen was about to break through. He flagged a trusted colleague, one who'd worked the security feeds before. "I need eyes on every corner," he muttered, "especially near the vending areas. Look for a man in travel clothes, tall, alone, no luggage." The hunt had begun. But this time, Daniel wasn't chasing. He was preparing for whoever came next. Daniel sent a quiet message to an old ally, Detective Quinn Lowe. Back in the day, she had deep intel contacts, and if anyone could confirm Delta Redwood's real scope, it was her. Meanwhile, Arco continued pacing outside Julia's door, unsettled. The German shepherd had never behaved this way. It wasn't just stress. He sensed something more than human. Each time an orderly passed, Arco growled low in his throat, until Daniel soothed him. At midnight, Daniel returned to Julia's room. She was sitting up, arms resting protectively over her belly. Pale moonlight streamed through the window, casting her in soft shadows. Her voice cracked as soon as she saw him. "I lied," she admitted. "Earlier, about my father." Daniel didn't speak, just sat beside her, letting the silence hold space for the truth. She took a shaky breath. He wasn't just scapegoated. He was part of it. He helped steal biotech data from a government lab. But then he tried to make it right. He wanted to expose them. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his pulse quickened. "He had a partner," she continued, "someone who disappeared when things went south. I think that's who I was supposed to meet here." One of Dad's old letters mentions a program called Project Homeward. He said it was the most dangerous thing Redwood had ever hidden. Daniel's brow furrowed. The name hit a chord. "Did you read the files?" he asked gently. Julia nodded. "There's something about animal testing. Advanced biological implants. They were building enhanced K9 units, more than just for detection. They were weaponizing them." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the door where Arco stood, tail still, posture rigid. Julia's voice grew quieter. "And the files hint at human trials. But nothing's confirmed. That's why I came. That's why they're hunting me." Daniel leaned back, the name Project Homeward burning in his thoughts. Whatever this was, it had gone far beyond any normal case. And he was already in too deep to walk away now. "They were implanting tech into dogs," Julia said, eyes clouded. "Bio upgrades, faster reflexes, battlefield infiltration, surveillance." Daniel didn't interrupt. "They used K9 units as prototypes. No approval, no oversight. Then, there were hints, rumors of human trials." She stopped, breath hitching. "But the records are vague. It's like they scrubbed the truth out, left only shadows." Daniel felt cold all over. He had read scattered reports of unauthorized experiments in combat zones, but no names, no faces. Now it had one. Delta Redwood. "You're sure it was them?" he asked quietly. Julia met his gaze. "I am, and they'll kill to make sure it stays buried." In the hallway, Arco barked. Short, sharp, a signal. Daniel rose immediately. "We're not safe here anymore." "I arranged a police escort," he added, lowering his voice. "But Redwood could have people anywhere, even in law enforcement. We need someone we trust." Julia's face tensed. "Why not go straight to the feds?" Daniel shook his head. "If this vanishes into official channels without a clear path, it might disappear forever. We need a clean handoff. I'll reach out to Quinn again. She'll know who we can trust." Julia nodded, but her hands trembled on the blanket. She turned her face to the window. The moon had vanished behind thick clouds. "I never wanted any of this," she whispered. "Not the secrets, not the danger. I just wanted to give my child a chance to grow up free of the shadows my father left behind." Daniel took a breath. Her words cut deep. He'd spent years haunted by the mistakes of another. His partner's death, the guilt, the silence that followed. Now maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to make something right. "We'll get out," he said gently. "Together." Daniel's guilt simmered beneath the surface. Retreating from the detective bureau hadn't erased the past. It had only buried it. Maybe this was the redemption he never sought, but desperately needed. Outside Julia's door, Arco let out a sharp bark. Something was near. In the dim glow of security monitors, Daniel and a handful of trusted airport officers scanned the feeds. Dozens of camera angles flicked by. Hallways, exits, corners rarely traveled. Then they spotted him again. The man from before. Grainy footage showed him near baggage claim, then moments later by a service elevator. Later, he lingered outside a restricted staff corridor. Always moving, always staying just out of view. "He knows our blind spots," said Stacy Blanco, the security tech. Could be ex-military or ex-law enforcement. Daniel nodded grimly. Probably Redwoods. And if there's one, there's likely more. Back in the clinic, Julia slept restlessly. Arco refused to leave her side, curled tightly at her feet, every muscle taut. The dog's instincts were running hot. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Quinn. Partial intel on Redwood. Big incident in 2008. Middle East lab collapse. Department of Defense quietly dropped contracts. Let's meet. She was driving overnight to avoid detection. Whatever she knew, she was risking everything to share it. Daniel stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't just about a pregnant woman with stolen documents. It was about everything Redwood had buried. Covert programs, lost prototypes, human experimentation. And Julia might be holding the final piece that tied it all together. Around 3 a.m., Daniel stepped away from the clinic to clear his mind. The terminal at night was an eerie place, echoes bouncing off glass, cleaners moving like shadows, neon light dancing across tile. He didn't see the man again, but he could feel him, watching, waiting. By dawn, Daniel was restless. The clinic walls felt too narrow, the air too still. Redwood's silence wasn't retreat. It was a storm building beneath radar. He and Arco took a slow patrol through Terminal B. Some security guards recognized him and nodded in respect. Others stared at the stoic German shepherd weaving through the shadows beside him. Then Arco froze, ears twitching, nose flaring. Daniel followed the dog's gaze to a steel door near Gate B7. It was marked Authorized Personnel Only. The handle rattled softly, once, then again. A draft or a signal? He pressed an ear to the door. Silence. But something felt wrong. A familiar tightness in his gut, the kind he hadn't felt since the bureau. No backup, no warning. Just him. He unholstered his flashlight, gave Arco the silent command, and slipped through the door. The baggage corridors beyond were dim, echoing, and twisted like veins beneath the airport. Crates stacked like barricades, machinery sleeping in stillness. Then movement, a flicker near a pile of cargo. Daniel advanced cautiously, flashlight sweeping low. Suddenly, footsteps thundered behind him. He turned just as a figure lunged from behind a crate, baton swinging. Daniel ducked. The weapon sliced the air where his skull had been. Arco charged in a blur of fur and teeth, sinking his jaws into the attacker's arm. The man howled, but kicked the dog hard, in the ribs. Arco recoiled with a whimper. Daniel didn't hesitate. He tackled the man. They crashed to the ground, wrestling in the dark, fists pounding, breath short. The man was strong, military trained probably, but Daniel was a survivor. A sharp snarl echoed. Arco latched onto the attacker's shoulder and dragged him back. The man froze, teeth gritted in pain, blood pooled where his jacket tore. Daniel pressed his knee into the man's chest. "Who sent you?" No answer, just rage and silence. The man's eyes locked with Arco's, cold, calculating. Then he spit blood and sneered, "You're in over your head, officer." Daniel shoved his weight down harder, growling, "Redwood sent you, didn't they?" A flicker, rage or pride, lit the man's expression. "Tell your pregnant friend," he hissed. "This ends tonight." That was enough. Daniel reached for his radio. Code yellow. Officer down corridor B7. Immediate assistance. But before help could arrive, the man went limp. For a split second, Daniel thought he'd passed out. Then he saw it. A capsule between the attacker's teeth. The man had bitten down. Convulsions hit fast. Limbs spasmed, back arched, eyes rolled back. "No, no, no." Daniel yanked him onto his side, trying to force the capsule out. Too late. Foam bubbled from the man's lips. Paramedics arrived moments later. They worked quickly, but there was no heartbeat. The poison had done its job. The agent had chosen death over capture. Daniel stared, frozen, as the body cooled beneath the terminal lights. Arco leaned close, pressing into Daniel's leg, sensing the shift, the dread now anchored in the air. This wasn't just surveillance anymore. This was war. Somewhere deep in Redwood's shadow network, someone had pulled the trigger. And now, they'd escalate. As the sky began to pale, a black sedan pulled into the lot near staff entry. From it emerged Detective Quinn Lowe, broad-shouldered, battle-worn, eyes sharp despite the sleepless night. Daniel met her at the gate. "I owe you," he said. "You owe me nothing," she replied, gripping his shoulder. "You said Redwood. I packed my gun." Daniel nodded. "It's worse than we thought." "Then let's see how bad it gets." The makeshift security office in the basement felt like a bunker. Tight walls, buzzing fluorescents, and silence that carried weight. Julia sat wrapped in a blanket, eyes still weary, but filled with something else now. Resolve. Arco curled tightly at her feet, unmoving. Quinn sifted through the stack of documents laid out before her. Her expression shifted from curiosity to something darker. "I've seen mentions of Redwood," she muttered, "always in redacted files or sealed intel, whispers about covert projects, and a weapons lab that accidentally vanished overseas. But this is the first time it's real." Julia flipped a document to a marked page. "My father was trying to expose them from the inside. He wasn't the only one, but the others vanished, or died." Her voice wavered. "I never had proof until now." Daniel shared what happened with the man in the terminal. Quinn listened, her jaw tightening. "Suicide capsules aren't new," she said flatly. "But it means we're dealing with trained operatives, ex-Black Ops maybe. They don't just want silence, they want erasure." Julia closed her eyes. "Then I'm next." "You're not," Daniel said firmly. Quinn nodded. "We take this to the DOJ's Corporate Crimes Unit. But Redwood's deep, too much sway. We need someone inside. Clean, untouchable." Julia's voice cracked. "And until then?" "We keep moving," Quinn said. "We stay unpredictable. Redwood can't hit what they can't track." Daniel looked between them. "Where do we start?" "By vanishing," Quinn replied. "No plan, no backup. Just a handful of names, a packet of evidence, a dog that trusted his instincts more than any badge, and a woman with more to lose than either of them combined." Daniel's voice was steady, but the tension in his jaw betrayed the storm brewing inside. "We need more than witness statements. We need proof Redwood can't scrub. Location data, project logs, facility blueprints." Quinn agreed. "We vanish first, then we strike with evidence they can't bury." Julia's fingers trembled as she stroked Arco's fur. The dog leaned in closer, calming her like a quiet guardian. Her eyes locked with Daniel's, full of fear, yes, but also fire. Quinn continued. "I've arranged a transport, safe house upstate. It's low-tech, off-grid. We'll regroup there and decide the next move." But just as calm began to settle, the lights flickered. Once, then again. The soft hum of electricity gave way to a rising whine. On the monitors, one security camera turned to static, then another, then all. A hush fell over the room. Daniel shot up. "They're here." "Burke's on the way," Quinn snapped, already packing the documents. "We leave now." Minutes later, a plain white delivery van pulled up behind the terminal. Burke stepped out, a grizzled ex-Marine with sharp eyes and a silence that spoke volumes. His only words, "Get in." Julia climbed in first, Arco at her heels. Daniel followed, heart pounding. As the van pulled away from the dim loading dock, he glanced back at the terminal. Nothing moved, but he felt eyes, everywhere. And for the first time, he knew. Redwood wasn't just watching. They were closing in. They planned to slip away unnoticed. The white van, the loading dock, the shadows. It was supposed to be clean, but plans rarely survived contact with Redwood. Just as they prepared to exit, Stacy Blanco burst in, breathless, eyes wide. Half the systems are down. Someone's in the sub-basement, sabotaging the main breaker. Daniel cursed under his breath. They're cutting the power, disabling the cameras. Quinn's voice dropped. No time for a standoff. We use the back route. Stacy, handle the sabotage. Julia nodded shakily. Thank you. All of you. Daniel gave her a tight smile. We're not out yet. They moved through the service tunnels, Burke leading. The place was cloaked in emergency lighting. Red strobes pulsed against the walls. The building groaned like it knew something awful was about to happen. Arco padded ahead, low to the ground, ears sharp. Julia leaned against Daniel as they moved. Every step looked harder for her. She gritted her teeth but said nothing. Then came the shots. A sharp volley echoed down the corridor. Drywall burst beside them. Burke ducked low, weapon raised. Quinn dragged Julia behind a support beam. Daniel dropped to one knee, firing back into the flashes of light ahead. Arco snarled and launched forward. Figures moved through the smoke. Tactical vests, assault rifles, silent comms. Redwood. One operative advanced steadily, face hidden behind a dark scarf. Two more flanked him like wraiths in combat stance. Daniel emptied his magazine. Burke reloaded beside him. They're hurting us, Burke growled. Then we cut a new path, Quinn barked. Another bullet zipped past Daniel's ear. They were cornered, and it was only the beginning. The corridor exploded with gunfire. Daniel ducked, pressing Julia behind him. Quinn moved like a shadow, calm, practiced. She fired a clean shot, grazing one operative, sending him stumbling back behind cover. They're pinning us, Burke shouted, shielding Julia with his frame. Suddenly, a loud alarm shrieked from deeper within the terminal. Stacy Blanco's sabotage had triggered an intruder alert. Redwood's team froze, momentarily disoriented. Quinn acted fast. This way, she snapped, gesturing to a narrow side passage. Daniel took Julia's hand. She was trembling, breath shaky. We're almost there, he murmured. They burst through to a rear loading bay. There it was, the white van, waiting with its doors wide. The ramp behind it yawned open to dawn's first light. Go, Burke bellowed. A Redwood agent rounded the far corner, rifle raised. Quinn dropped him with two sharp shots. The second bullet hit square. He collapsed, the weapon clattering on concrete. Daniel helped Julia into the van, followed closely by Arco, who barked furiously as he jumped inside. Burke climbed in and gunned the engine. Quinn slammed the door shut just as bullets ricocheted off the van's panels. Through the back window, Daniel saw one Redwood operative watching them. Helmeted, silent, his expression masked but unmistakable in body language. Fury. The van peeled away from the ramp, screeching past shocked staff and slamming into the open road. Behind them, the airport shrank. Inside, silence reigned for a beat. Julia collapsed into sobs. Arco nudged her gently, licking her cheek. She laughed, just once. Shaky, real. For now, they were free. I'm just so tired, Julia whispered. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder as the van sped across moonlit roads. We're safe, for now. He didn't know whether he was comforting her or himself. In the front seat, Quinn dialed her phone. I'll coordinate with the locals, she muttered. Make sure Redwood can't follow easily. Daniel gave a stiff nod. He didn't trust official channels. Redwood had reach in too many places. Still, delay was better than nothing. Arco curled beside Julia, his head resting on her leg like a silent vow to protect her. She stroked his fur, eyes brimming again, though this time with something like fragile peace. The van drove deeper into rural silence. Soon, a broken ranch house loomed into view. Slanted roof, cracked wood siding, half swallowed by desert brush. Burke killed the engine. Silence dropped like a curtain. Quinn exited first, scanning the brush with her sidearm. The only sound was wind rustling through brittle grass and an old porch swing creaking like a ghost. "Clear, for now," she said. Inside, the air was thick with dust. A single kerosene lamp lit the main room, throwing shadows across sagging beams and a threadbare couch. Burke reinforced the door with a warped table and chain. Every clang of his hammer echoed too loudly in Daniel's ears. Julia sank into the couch, her arms protectively cradling her belly. Arco lay at her feet like a statue of loyalty. In the back, Burke got a generator working. Lights flickered on, dim bulbs strung across the rafters, revealed rusted tools, dismantled tractor parts, and crates of old supplies. Daniel checked the windows, boarded, but not sealed. Slivers of moonlight bled through. Not perfect cover, but for the moment, it would have to do. They'd earned one night, one breath. Daniel moved room to room, patching the gaps in the wooden walls with strips of old feed sack fabric. Each time his hammer struck, Julia flinched. Quinn noticed, stepping beside him. "No more sudden bangs," she murmured, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We need her calm." Daniel nodded and swapped the hammer for duct tape, pressing the cloth into place with silence. Meanwhile, Quinn unpacked a battered first aid kit on the kitchen counter. Gauze, field dressings, a nearly expired EpiPen, scattered signs of past battles. She added protein bars and bottled water from Burke's duffel. Then she paused, holding up a rusty coffee tin. "Instant," she sighed. "Tastes like motor oil, but it's hot." She filled a dented pot from a rain barrel outside and set it on a camp stove. The hiss of steam soon filled the room, blending with the faint scent of juniper drifting through the broken window slats. In that brief moment, the old ranch felt less like a hideout, more like a home. They gathered around a dusty trunk-turned-coffee table. Quinn poured the black liquid into chipped mugs. Julia cupped hers with both hands, inhaling the sharp scent. "Smells like punishment," she joked, offering a weak smile. Quinn smirked. "Keeps you awake long enough to regret drinking it." Burke declined a mug and stepped onto the porch, rigging a tripwire from fishing line between the posts. Arco watched his every move through the open door, ears twitching. Inside, silence thickened. Daniel broke it. "You ever think how many safe houses like this we've sat in over the years?" Quinn's gaze met his, weary but wry. "Too many. Kabul, Bogota, now some broken-down ranch in Arizona." She tapped her mug with a finger. "Closest thing to a vacation I've had in a decade." Julia chuckled softly, a tired kind of laughter. "I always pictured my dessert escape with sunrise yoga and overpriced smoothies." Daniel smirked, leaning against the wall. "We'll book that spa trip after we're not being hunted." The lantern flickered, casting elongated shadows across the floor. Julia's smile faded as her eyes followed them. "I keep thinking about my father," she said, her voice low. "He used to say the desert makes you honest. I never understood what that meant. But now, I think he was trying to prepare me." She traced the rim of her mug slowly. He died alone. Across the table, Quinn reached out and placed a hand over hers. "He did everything he could to protect you. That's more than most kids get." Julia looked down, blinking hard. I don't want any of us to end up like that. Daniel swallowed. Keith's face flashed through his memory. His old partner, lifeless in the rain, eyes open and unseeing. He clenched his jaw. Redwood doesn't get to decide that. Outside, wind scraped the porch in dry bursts. Then, a soft thip. Arco's ears perked instantly. A growl curled from deep in his chest. Daniel stood up. So did Quinn. Movement, Burke's voice called from outside. They rushed toward the barricaded door. Burke crouched low, shotgun raised, eyes focused. Quinn peered through a slit between boards. I don't see anyone. Daniel moved to the window. A shadow flickered just out of range. They were no longer alone in the desert. A faint scratching noise whispered across the porch. Once. Twice. Everyone froze. Burke raised his shotgun, eyes scanning. Daniel pressed closer to a walnut, peeking through. Moonlight flickered on something small near the rail. Another squeal followed, chittering, light. Then, a thin raccoon emerged, digging into a discarded trash bag. Burke exhaled with a chuckle. Rodent recon, he muttered, lowering the weapon. Daniel let out a shaky breath. Tripwire still works. Back inside, Julia was clutching her blanket tight. He knelt beside her, voice calm. Just a raccoon. Funny, she whispered. My heart didn't get the memo. Arco wagged his tail, brushing against her arm. She smiled weakly, scratching behind his ears. Meanwhile, Quinn rummaged through the kitchen, trying to charge the satellite hotspot. Her hand brushed against something hard buried in a cabinet. A small wooden box, dusty and worn. She opened it and froze. Inside was a scorched security badge, the name still legible. Vale Patrick, Senior Systems Engineer. Below it, a worn military dog tag rested against soft fabric. The digits were almost unreadable, but on the back, a serial number was faintly engraved. Quinn's eyes widened. She had seen that number before, in Redwood's encrypted archives. She called Daniel and Julia over. When Daniel saw the badge, he paled. He's alive, he whispered. Vale was here. Julia reached for the dog tag with trembling fingers. My father. He said someone named Vale knew the truth, all of it. A buried ally, a ghost in the system, and maybe their only hope. If he was hiding in this region, Quinn said, closing the wooden box, he might have planted supplies in safe houses like this. Daniel nodded. That badge, it's not just a clue. It's a breadcrumb. Doyle's hideout isn't a guess anymore. This is his backyard. Later that night, Burke rolled out a shooting mat near the back door. He laid a compact handgun on it and gestured for Julia. If things go bad at the airfield, he said, you'll need more than nerves. Daniel stepped forward, concerned. She's 37 weeks. But Julia raised a steady hand. Teach me. Burke softened his stance, his gravelly voice almost gentle. He showed her the grip, the stance, the breath control. Julia followed, her movements stiff but determined. Arco sat near Daniel, watching like a sentinel. After a few dry fire drills, Burke gave a slow nod. You hit center mass at 10 feet. You'll make any shooter rethink their day. Julia's hands trembled as she lowered the gun, but her eyes, those were steady. Thank you, she said quietly. Then, at just past 2 a.m., Julia gasped. A sharp pain jolted through her abdomen. She doubled over, clutching the edge of the sofa. Daniel rushed to her side. Talk to me. Cramp? No. Contraction, she breathed. Quinn appeared instantly with a stopwatch app. Let's time them. If they're scattered and weak, it's stress. If they're steady, we go to Plan B. Plan B? Julia asked through clenched teeth. Hospital in Tucson, 2 hours south, Quinn answered, unless Redwood's watching it. They exchanged grim looks, After 10 tense minutes, the pain faded. False alarm, but its message was loud and clear. Time was running out. At dawn, pale pink light slipped through the boarded windows. Coyotes cried faintly in the distance, a desert lullaby fading. Inside the safe house, Quinn and Daniel crouched over a faded map spread across the trunk. Red dot marked their current location. Blue X hovered over Doyle's Head Airfield. Thick black circles surrounded every highway checkpoint. All flagged, Quinn muttered. DOJ suspects Redwood influence. Burke, sitting back with a water canteen, grunted. Then we go cross-country. He traced a jagged path over dry washes, mining trails, and abandoned roads. 45 miles, no cameras, no patrols, just dust and heat. Julia sat propped against cushions, her face pale but determined. Quinn looked over. It's rough terrain. Are you ready? Julia gave a firm nod. Every minute we stall, they gain ground. My dad didn't risk everything for us to sit here. Daniel handed her a fresh water bottle. Then we leave at sundown. Rest now. As night returned, the kerosene lamp was snuffed out. Only slits of starlight pierced the wooden slats. Outside, the generator coughed and then died. Burke had shut it down to conserve fuel. Silence swallowed the ranch. Julia curled on the sofa, Arco resting protectively at her feet. Daniel slouched into a battered armchair, rifle cradled across his lap. He told himself he wouldn't sleep, but the desert had its own lullabies. Then, a flicker. Headlights swept the far hills, gone in a blink. Daniel jolted upright. On the porch, Burke raised a clenched fist, silent warning. Daniel's blood ran cold. Redwood had found them. Daniel stirred from half-sleep. For a second, he thought he'd seen headlights, but nothing came. Just shadows and starlight. Maybe a rancher. Maybe a phantom. The desert kept its secrets. He exhaled, gaze drifting to Julia. Her expression was soft, lit by the last slivers of moonlight. One hand rested on her belly, the other curled in Arco's fur. They breathed together, synchronized and steady. One woman, one dog, guard and guarded. Daniel closed his eyes just briefly. For the first time, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like anticipation, as if the world itself were holding its breath, not in fear, but in hope, waiting for sunrise, for justice, for the sound of a baby's cry defying everything Redwood had tried to silence. That night, the decision solidified. At dusk tomorrow, they would drive into the desert, toward Doyle's Head, toward ghosts, toward truth. The next day passed in fragments. They traveled by night, rested by day. The group split into two vehicles. Quinn and Burke handled supplies in an SUV. Daniel, Julia, and Arco moved in a station wagon. Less suspicious, easier to vanish. The drive was brutal. The desert was wide, unforgiving, a sea of sand and sky. But it gave them space to breathe. At one remote gas station, Daniel watched Julia feed Arco scraps from a protein bar. The dog didn't leave her side, not once. He wasn't just a companion now. He was her shield. Quinn mapped alternate routes, red ink slashing across a paper map like battle plans. Burke checked the SUV with methodical precision. Everyone knew this was the final stretch. At sundown on the fourth day, the buildings of Doyle's Head shimmered on the horizon, dusty outlines in gold light. It was time. Dust clouds rose as the cars rolled to a stop on a ridge, revealing a stark view of Doyle's Head. The airfield lay below, a fenced-in facility with squat buildings, dim security lights, and a single guarded checkpoint. Through binoculars, Quinn assessed the compound. That's Redwood. Classic private perimeter. A hangar. Warehouses. One entry. No flag, no ID numbers. Daniel stared at the dark structures. His gut twisted. That's where they tested the K9 units? Julia asked, eyes fixed on the gates. Quinn nodded. And more. This place is off the books. It's a black site. Daniel glanced at Arco, who leaned silently against his leg. The dog had always seemed too sharp, too responsive. What if Arco's not just trained? Daniel muttered. What if he's part of their breeding project? Burke broke the silence. Then it's time we find answers. Quinn laid out the plan. We wait until full dark. Cut the west fence. Less lighting. No patrol camera loops. And if someone's inside? Daniel asked. We grab them. We get the truth. In and out. Julia placed her hand on her stomach. I'll wait at the perimeter. Don't slow down for me. Daniel touched her shoulder gently. You're not slowing us down. You're why we're doing this. As night fell, the desert turned black. A ghost mission was about to begin. The team moved in silence. Quinn led the way through the desert brush. Daniel followed with Arco close to his leg, ears twitching. Burke brought up the rear, eyes sweeping. Julia kept pace behind them, her breath shallow, her hand gripping the small pistol Quinn had given her. The fence loomed ahead, rusted chain link, partially hidden by boulders. West side, just like the plan. Burke crouched and began to cut through the metal with careful precision. Each snip echoed too loudly. One mistake, one glance from a patrolling guard, and it would be over. Finally, a gap opened. They slipped through. Inside, the compound reeked of old gasoline and scorched desert air. Every shadow hummed with tension. The air felt thick with warning. They crept toward a warehouse wall, tall, windowless, and solid. Quinn knelt by a side door with a glowing keypad. She pulled a hacking tool from her pouch. I can get us in, she whispered. Just give me a minute. Suddenly, Arco growled low. His body went rigid. Footsteps. A redwood guard rounded the corner, rifle ready, goggles glowing faint green. Quinn froze. Burke vanished behind a crate. Julia pressed into the wall, barely breathing. Daniel hushed Arco, but the guard sensed something. He raised his weapon. Too late. Arco lunged, his jaws locked around the guard's arm, forcing the man's shot wide. Daniel tackled him, struggling for control. The rifle discharged again, a burst into the air. Then, a second voice. Kale, you good? Quinn spun, pistol raised. One shot. The second guard dropped. Alarms hadn't blared yet, but silence had been broken. Burke subdued the guard, locking him in a chokehold until the man slumped. The others dragged the body inside just as the steel door thudded shut behind them. Inside the warehouse, silence reigned. Cages lined the walls, stained, rusted, and empty. Daniel stared at them, bile rising in his throat. Whatever had been kept here, it hadn't been human. Not entirely. Julia stepped forward, her voice trembling. They tested animals here? Quinn nodded, scanning the shadows. Likely more than that. This is only the front. They moved deeper. Dim lights buzzed overhead, casting eerie flickers along the cracked cement. Beyond the cages, a corridor stretched into the darkness. Distant shouts echoed faintly. They've found the bodies, Burke muttered, clocks ticking. At the end of the hallway, Julia halted. A door stood there, faded redwood emblem scorched into its surface. Below it, a rusted plaque bore the name, Lieutenant Marshall Rivers, Project Homeward. Julia's breath caught. My father. He was here. Daniel stepped beside her, his hand warm on her arm. Arco leaned into her leg, as if sensing her pain. We'll find what he left, Daniel said softly. Whatever he tried to protect. Quinn jammed a crowbar into the doorframe and heaved. With a groan of metal and years of silence, the door gave way. Inside was a small lab. Dust clung to every surface, cabinets locked, monitors long dead. At the far end stood a massive steel vault, sealed, untouched. "This," Quinn said, breath shallow, "is what they were hiding." Gunfire cracked in the distance. The team sprinted into the lab's back chamber. No keypad this time, just a cold metal combination lock. Quinn hissed, "No time for finesse." Burke dropped to one knee, pulling out a stethoscope. "Keep eyes on the hallway," he barked. "This won't be quick." Daniel moved to the doorway, weapon raised. Behind them, Arco growled, ears high, body taut. He sensed something coming. Outside, boots thundered closer. Redwood was closing in. Julia stood just behind Burke, her hands balled into fists. That vault. It might be her father's final legacy, the evidence to bury Redwood, or a grave of regrets. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. A wave of cold air rolled out, sealed for years. Inside, shelves stacked with labeled crates, file boxes, and magnetic tape. At the far wall, a locked cage held a row of hard drives and faded binders, marked with the red Redwood insignia. Julia stepped forward and froze. Her father's name, Rivers, was scrawled across a worn file box in thick marker. She reached out. Then, bang! The outer door exploded inward. Redwood guards flooded in. Gunfire erupted, sparks lighting the room. Daniel tackled Julia, shielding her body as bullets pinged off the vault's steel frame. Quinn flipped a desk and returned fire. Burke stayed low, dragging the Rivers box toward cover. Arco lunged with a feral snarl, intercepting the first guard before he could aim. It was chaos, but the vault was open. The truth was within reach. Chaos raged in the vault corridor. Arco lunged at a Redwood guard, forcing him back. The man swung wildly, nearly striking the dog. Just as he raised his rifle to fire, Daniel pulled the trigger, dropping the threat before harm could reach Arco. Quinn was pinned behind a row of old servers, gunfire stitching the air above her. Burke tore through the Rivers file box, yanking out a handful of portable drives. "We've got some external backups," he yelled. Daniel pointed to a steel cage in the vault corner. "That's the mother lode. We need it all." Julia clung to him. "We can't leave anything. Redwood will erase it." Daniel nodded grimly. The enemy advanced, disciplined, unrelenting. Another squad flanked right. They were nearly surrounded. No other way out. Then, sudden gunfire. Not theirs. From the corridor behind Redwood's troops, a new barrage cut through the air. Daniel glimpsed a figure in desert camo, older, bearded, firing with surgical precision. The Redwood team turned, caught off guard. Quinn wasted no time. "Go!" The newcomer pushed forward with practiced speed, picking off enemies, forcing the rest to fall back. In the confusion, Daniel shielded Julia and Arco as they ran. Quinn and Burke followed, arms full of drives and folders. Redwood's formation fractured. As they reached the exit, the bearded man lowered his rifle slightly, nodding at them. "I've been waiting a long time for someone to crack this place open," he said, voice like gravel. The man's badge glinted under the broken light. Patrick Vale. Julia's breath caught. You were my father's partner?" Vale nodded, face lined with sorrow. "Marshal Rivers was a good man. He saved my life. I stayed behind, tried to sabotage Redwood from the inside, but they were too powerful. I've been hiding here, gathering what I could." Tears brimmed in Julia's eyes. He died trying to warn the world. Vale's jaw clenched. "And now we make sure his voice is finally heard. No time for more." "Come," Vale urged. "They're regrouping." The team dashed after him. He led them through a narrow hall and out a rusted emergency exit he had rigged years ago. The desert air hit them like a wave, cold, sharp, and vast. Behind them, chaos exploded. Redwood operatives scrambled, yelling, unsure where the breach had gone. Gunfire echoed, erratic, A single redwood guard spotted them. Arco lunged, ferocious, snarling, forcing the man back. Quinn fired once into the air. The guard dove for cover, giving them precious seconds. They reached a half-buried jeep behind a dune. Vale jumped into the driver's seat. "Get in." They piled in. Quinn, Burke, Daniel, Julia, with the file boxes clutched tightly to her chest. Arco leapt beside her, panting but alert. The engine roared. As the jeep tore across the sands, the redwood compound shrank behind them, its lights flickering, its grip weakening. They hit the highway under a sea of stars. No one spoke. Julia stared at the files in her lap, silent tears tracing her cheeks. Daniel reached over and gently squeezed her hand. She looked at him with a fragile smile, and Arco, brave, loyal, rested his head on her lap as the road stretched out before them. The drives clattered softly as Julia placed them on the old work table. Her arms trembled, not from weight, but from what they carried. Her father's legacy, the secrets of Redwood, and perhaps justice for countless lost. Behind them, the glow of the burning facility still echoed in their minds. Ahead, uncertainty. They had made it to a makeshift safe house, an abandoned service station Vale had secured years earlier. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Dust clung to oil drums and dismantled engines. The air stank of rust and motor oil, but it was safe. For now. Quinn wasted no time. She hooked a laptop into one of the drives. "If even half this data holds, Redwood's done," she muttered. Vale leaned against a dented toolbox, arms crossed. "It started with dogs," he said. "Frontline infiltration units. K9's enhanced for perception, obedience, endurance. Arco might be one of them." Daniel turned toward the dog. Arco's eyes met his, steady, intelligent, almost too knowing. "They didn't stop with animals," Vale continued grimly. "Phase 2 was human trials. Markers, implants. They tried to mold loyalty into biology." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And the dogs? They survived?" "Some," Vale said. "Barely. Redwood spliced genes, experimented on bloodlines, even installed neural implants. Many didn't make it, but those who did." He glanced at Arco. "They were extraordinary." Daniel knelt and stroked the shepherd's fur. "He's never been chipped, never been sick, just aware. Like he knew what I needed." Vale nodded. "Which means he's proof Redwood never wanted found." Julia sat down hard, her breath shallow. A sudden wave of pain curled through her body. She gasped, clutching her stomach. Daniel rushed to her side. "Julia." Her eyes locked onto his. "It's time." Julia leaned against the wall, pain rippling through her as contractions came faster. But she refused to lie down. Not yet. Not while Quinn and Burke were still at the laptop, uploading damning files, proof of Redwood's crimes. "I feel like this," Julia whispered, "is bigger than I ever imagined. My father. He died for this, and I barely understood why." Vale's voice, gravel soft, came from behind her. "He wanted you safe. That's why he hid the truth and kept you away. Now, we carry it for him." The monitor blinked with progress bars, file after file spilling into secure channels, testing logs, illegal operations, names, evidence no one could ignore. Daniel and Vale fortified doors, stacking debris, bracing for retaliation. Then it came. A crash. The station's front door burst inward. Redwood's strike team. Gunfire ripped through the air. Daniel pulled Julia down behind a bench as Vale sealed an inner steel door, shouting, "Hold them back!" Smoke hissed. Tear gas canisters bounced across the floor. Visibility vanished. Quinn fired blindly through the haze, tears streaming from her burning eyes. Burke dragged hard drives toward a rear window. A bullet tore into Vale's shoulder. He grunted and fell behind a rusted desk, blood seeping fast. "Keep the files moving," he shouted. Julia coughed, vision spinning. Arco leapt into the fray, snarling, taking down the first Redwood man who charged through. The room shook with chaos, but amidst it, the upload bar blinked. Complete. Quinn gasped. "It's done. DOJ. Every major outlet. It's out." Julia sobbed with relief, even as the smoke thickened. The truth had escaped. Even if they wouldn't, smoke thickened like a veil as Julia cradled her belly, her knees buckling. A cry caught in her throat. The pain was sharp, rhythmic, no mistaking it. She was in labor, in the middle of a firefight. Daniel was at her side instantly, pressing a cloth to her mouth to block the gas. Around them, bullets hissed, windows shattered. Quinn ducked behind a steel beam, returning fire. Burke screamed over the roar. "Upload's still going. Don't let them breach." A sniper shot cracked through the side window. "Snipers outside too," Quinn shouted. Vale, bloodied but defiant, crawled to a side exit. With one final surge, he locked and jammed the door with a crowbar, buying them a few seconds more. But the enemy was coming fast. Daniel pulled Julia behind an overturned table. Her eyes locked onto his, desperate and pained. "It's starting," she whispered. Contractions hit harder now. Her whole body trembled. Daniel's mind raced. Not here. Not now. "Burke, how long?" he yelled. 80%, Burke called back. "If I move, we lose everything." Another volley of bullets screamed overhead. Quinn crawled beside them, gas streaming from her eyes. "Get her out. We'll hold the line." Daniel hesitated, torn. Then Arco barked, a deep warning snarl. No more time. "Let's go," Daniel said. He scooped Julia into his arms. She gasped, her fingers gripping his shirt. The floor beneath them rumbled as Redwood forces charged again. Arco bounded ahead, barking wildly. Behind them, Burke stayed hunched over the laptop, trembling hands guarding the final upload. The baby was coming, and no one could stop it now. Vale, pale and bleeding, met Daniel's eyes. "Take her, now." He motioned to a metal hatch near the floor, an old maintenance crawl space. Daniel rushed to it, pried it open, and revealed a dark, narrow passage. Without hesitation, he eased Julia into the tunnel. Arco followed, tail low, ears alert. Just as Daniel turned back, a Redwood soldier burst in. Vale intercepted him, crashing into the man with a grunt. They fell hard, weapons clattering. A shot cracked out. Vale recoiled. Blood bloomed at his side. Still he fought, pinning the attacker. Daniel froze, watching. Vale's gaze found his one last time. There was no fear, only peace. Then Redwood soldiers swarmed the room, and Vale vanished beneath them. Daniel dropped into the crawl space, closing the hatch behind. Above them, chaos echoed, shouting, gunfire, the fierce voice of Quinn still resisting. Julia's breath came in gasps. Sweat slicked her brow. Her body shook with contractions. "It's okay," Daniel whispered. "You're safe. We're close." Arco moved beside her, pressing his muzzle to her hand. The crawl space twisted through darkness, gritty and tight. Daniel crawled ahead, guiding Julia slowly through. Then, light. He spotted a break in the wall, and beyond it, the pink shimmer of dawn. They reached the end of the tunnel near a dry drainage ditch behind the station. Fresh air flooded them. Sirens wailed in the distance, uncertain whether they signaled hope or danger. Redwood might still have eyes here. Daniel lifted Julia into his arms once more. She groaned, barely conscious. Arco trotted beside them, never straying. Gunfire still echoed from the building behind them. Then, slowly, it faded. Daniel sat quietly on the edge of a hospital chair, his hands trembling. his face streaked with dust and dried tears. Julia lay in a nearby bed, pale and radiant all at once, gripping his hand as another wave of pain swept through her. They had made it out, but not everyone had. Vale's sacrifice haunted Daniel's mind. So did the fate of Quinn and Burke. Were they alive? Had Redwood been stopped? Time blurred. An ambulance had found them along the highway. Julia had been rushed into delivery. Daniel had stayed with her the entire time. Even Arco, ever faithful, refused to leave the hallway, barking only once when the doctor arrived too quickly. And then, her cry. A small, perfect voice pierced the hospital walls, raw and new and impossibly loud. Julia held the baby girl close, tears in her eyes, whispering, "She's safe, finally safe." Daniel stepped forward, unsure if he belonged in that moment, but Julia reached out, pulled him closer, and placed the infant in his arms. "You were part of this," she said, "all of it." Later, news came in waves. Quinn, wounded but alive, recovering in another hospital. Burke, alive too, though he would carry scars. But Vale had died protecting them all. His sacrifice wasn't in vain. The files had gone public. Redwood expose flashed across national news. High-level arrests, raids, government investigations. Executives vanished. The truth couldn't be buried again. Julia watched the footage from her hospital bed, holding her newborn tightly. "If my father could see this," she whispered, "maybe, just maybe, he'd know it wasn't all for nothing." Daniel, eyes filled with quiet strength, nodded. "You gave his truth a voice." Julia sat on the hospital bed, brushing a hand across her tired eyes. "I'm so grateful. To you, Arco, Quinn, all of you who protected us." Daniel shook his head gently. "You owe me nothing." He knelt and gave Arco a soft pat. Actually, Arco might want visitation rights with the baby. A laugh broke from Julia's lips, wet, emotional. She looked down at her daughter, dozing peacefully in her arms. "That's a promise." For a moment, silence settled between them. Not heavy like before, but warm. A shared breath of survival, a hush of peace. Daniel's mind drifted to that pivotal day, Arco barking frantically in the Redwood Regional Airport. That bark had sparked everything. Without Arco's instincts, Daniel might never have saved Julia, never uncovered the conspiracy, never helped bring Redwood to its knees. Now, the corporation's dark roots were exposed. The child they once sought to control was safe, born into a world a little more truthful, a little less cruel. A knock. Detective Quinn slipped in, arm in a sling. She gave Daniel a nod, then approached Julia with a faint, tired smile. "You sure know how to stir up trouble, Rivers." Julia smiled. "Couldn't have done it without you." Quinn peered over Julia's shoulder at the infant. "She's beautiful. I might just file for godmother privileges." The attempt at levity didn't mask the shadows in her eyes. She, too, had seen how close they came to being erased. Arco patted over and sniffed gently at Quinn's bandaged arm. Despite everything, they had survived. Quinn scratched gently behind Arco's ears. "Good boy," she whispered. "You saved more lives than you'll ever know." A hush fell over the hospital room. The empire of secrets, Redwood, had collapsed. Files unsealed, projects exposed, Project Homeward, the K9 enhancements, the human trials, all laid bare. Some scars might never fade, but the future now shimmered with possibility. Julia's baby cooed in her arms, soft and serene, as if welcoming that new dawn. Daniel stepped out into the hallway, giving mother and child space. The Arizona sun poured through tall windows, warm against his face. He inhaled deeply, lighter now, as if the air no longer carried the weight of secrets and guilt. Arco patted beside him, nuzzling his hand. Daniel smiled. "We did good, buddy." Later on the hospital's steps, Julia stood with the baby wrapped tight in her arms. Quinn leaned on a cane, her strength slowly returning. Burke waved from the truck, his ribs bound, but alive. They had made it. Daniel approached Julia and handed her a soft stuffed animal. "For her," he said. Julia's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. For everything." There were no more words. Not about Redwood. Not about her father's sacrifice. Not about Vale's final stand. Not about the dog who barked in an airport and saved a life. The baby was proof, living, breathing, that even amidst cruelty and corruption, life could fight back. Life could win. They parted with promises. Quinn would ensure Redwood's leaders faced justice. Burke would testify. Vale's name would be honored. And Julia, with her daughter, would finally live free. Daniel watched them drive away. Dust curled under their tires. The desert sun blazed above. And by his side, Arco stood tall and silent. Together, they turned and walked into a world no longer ruled by fear. A new chapter had begun.